Chapter 671, Greed. As dusk came, Tang Xiu drove to Star City Airport. Although he did not know for what purpose Mu Weining was visiting Star City this time, he still had to pick her up and even booked a box in the Long's dining hall. He was guessing that it was his mother's idea of wanting him to go to Shanghai to study, so Mu Weining came over, and it was very likely that he would have prepared to go Shanghai with her. 6 in the afternoon. A beautiful figure appeared at the airport exit. After Tang Xiu saw Mu Weining, he immediately waved at her, but he then froze as he saw that there was a beautiful middle-aged couple with Mu Weining. The most notable thing was that Mu Weining bore some resemblance to the woman. "You're Tang Xiu, right? A very capable young man indeed." The middle-aged man behind Mu Weining, donning a formal suit and tie, showed a look of satisfaction on his face after he saw Tang Xiu. The gorgeous woman also let out a faint smile and said, "The man our Weining has taken a liking to is naturally excellent. Tang Xiu, I'm very satisfied with you." Tang Xiu's lower lip squirmed. At this moment, even if he was stupid, there was no way he could not figure out the identity of this middle-aged couple. He wryly smiled inwardly, though he put on a modest expression on the surface, and greeted, "How do you do, uncle and auntie? Welcome to Star City." There was a blushing color on Mu Weining's beautiful face, and yet one could also see a trace of helplessness there. There was a trace of apology in her tone when she spoke. "Tang Xiu, my parents kind of urged me to bring them to Star City, so It was your dad and mom who insisted in inviting us to visit Star City to be their guests last year, Tang Xiu." Mu Jianhua interrupted her and said with a smile. "Since we're not that busy after the new year, we came here to visit. The relationship between you and Weining will become much closer sooner or later, and we, as her guardians, give our consent, so we naturally must get closer as well." Tang Xiu recalled the mysterious smile his father showed him in the afternoon and immediately felt somewhat helpless inside. Although he had already explained the true state of his relationship with Mu Weining, that they were just a fake couple, now it seemed that they simply did not take it seriously. He could also see that helplessness and apologetic look in Mu Weining's eyes and buckled up himself after giving it a bit of thought. In any case, he would have to find himself a wife who would give birth to his children sooner or later, while Mu Weining herself also understood the state of affairs he was in. If she wished to make do in such a situation, he could not always oppose the idea straightly. He had been devoting his whole life to refine his resolve on the path to immortality, and now that there was a woman who wanted to enter the trajectory of his life and did not tally with his original idea, then it was clear that she was willing to be with him and did not wish to part. While all sorts of thoughts were churning inside his heart, Tang Xiu quickly thought up some things. He displayed the attitude of a younger generation facing Mu Weining's parents as he lifted their luggage, invited them to board the car, and then drove towards Southgate Town. At home. After Tang Xiu saw the meeting of both parents, he realized that today's meeting was not the first time they met, as both parents had met for several times already back when they were in the capital. Even his mother, Su Lingyun, toured and visited many places of historic interests and scenic beauty in Beijing, accompanied by Mu Weining's mother, Jiang Jinli. On the second floor. After Tang Xiu took Mu Weining into his room, he forced out a smile and said, "I thought you had gone to Shanghai already. Never expected that you would visit Star City with your parents all of a sudden today. Those four, they have set this up for quite some time, haven't they?" "I'm really sorry, Tang Xiu," said Mu Weining with an apologetic smile. "Actually, I only learned about it before I was about to leave for Star City. I would have already called you in advance otherwise." Tang Xiu waved his hand and turned on the heating in the bedroom. "It's all right. Actually, I've told my parents the truth about our relationship, and yet they sure like you so much since they put so much effort in doing this. And to be honest, I do like you very much since everyone does love beauty, after all, but liking you doesn't mean that it's love, however. Besides, I still have a lot of important things to do, so if you really wish to, let us just get along slowly. As for to what step we'll come to, let us just watch how things will come out, and discuss about this again later." getting along together? Mu Weining stared at Tang Xiu in disbelief, and yet the pleasant surprise quickly filled her heart. So to say, would they be in a relationship later? Kana's hunting grounds. After recuperating for a few days, Jin Sanqi had forced out all the poisons in his body, while Ji Sijie's injuries had also healed. Neither of them left, however, as they were waiting for the news of the investigation from the Strange Doors people. For both of them, finding out clearly about Tang Xiu's identity was very important since the issue on Immortal Trove was, after all, of the utmost importance. They must do whatever it takes to obtain it should an opportunity arise. Dum dum dum. Strange sounds, like drum beats coming from the distant sky, were as though drilling into their hearts. The rhythm of the sound was very particular. It felt like it was a summoning sign for them. Jin Sanqi's and Jin Sijie's complexions changed greatly. The two men who were previously cultivating inside the room looked at each other with disbelief painted on their faces, as their figure instantly disappeared the moment after. At the back of the mountain of Kana's hunting grounds. After the two men quickly flew past the highest peak of the mountain, they lifted their hands nearly at the same time to rub their eyes. When their line of sight turned clearer and was sure that they were not seeing things, they knelt on the ground and repeatedly kowtowed towards an old man who sat cross-legged under an old tree in the summit. The old man, whose body exuded a rotten smell and donned a long, hand-woven hemp robe, had hair coiled like a bun and wrinkles on his face. His eyes were particularly deep and profound, as if he had the universe contained within, along with the sun, the moon, and the stars. His skinny hand was holding a snare drum that was the source of the strange drumbeat that came from above. "Why you're still alive, master," muttered Jin Sanqi, full of excitement. The old man in hemp robe faintly smiled and said, "This old man never expected to still be alive. Had it not been because the Imperial Dragon chart protected my last bit of true soul and foretold that an imminent catastrophe is about to befall the two of you, I would have probably perished already and had my soul dissipated. A big disaster is about to befall upon them?" Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie looked at each other and suddenly recalled the crisis of a few days ago. The expression in their eyes when they looked at the old man in a hemp robe turned more reverential. Their master left them two magic weapons more than 60 years ago, as well as an ancient manual for cultivation before he flew up, and no news about him was heard since. After so many years, they thought that their master had already passed away, and never had the thought that he would still be alive and return to see them again one day. They both were raised by their master, Daoist Qianquan. Back when Daoist Qianquan adopted them, he was already 180 years old and, added with the time he went missing for about 20 years and being still alive, it indicated that he was now 260 years of age. "Did you break through to the golden core stage, master?" asked Jin Sanqi with a cautious expression. Daoist Qianquan nodded and said, "More than 60 years ago, I actually felt that breaking through to the golden core stage was imminent. Hence I secluded myself from the world to cultivate, and eventually became a golden core stage expert. Just as I broke through, however, that damned old blind persecuted and trapped me inside the abstrusine ground, but then I was able to tread on the nascent, thus escaping the predicament. I would probably be unable to escape if it wasn't for the Imperial Dragon chart." "Did you just say that you have broken through to the nascent soul stage, master?" exclaimed Jin Sijie hurriedly. "Since when breaking through to the nascent soul stage is an easy feat to achieve?" Daoist Qianquan shook his head. "The Imperial Dragon chart stored the blood essence of the two of you a long time ago, children. I happen to own a secret art that I inject to it, and thus I sense that there would be an imminent disaster befalling upon you too. Never did I expect that I would finally be able to escape from the abstrusine ground after self-destructing my golden core, to detonate the Imperial Dragon chart." Self-destructing the golden core? Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie were dumbfounded. Though they had not yet reached the golden core stage, they also knew what the consequences of exploding their own golden core were. "But master, are you all right now?" Jean Sanchi's heart was full of emotion, with worry and concern. My cultivation dropped sharply by 4 levels, and my present situation is only comparable to the early golden core stage. Daoist Qianquan smiled bitterly. I was greatly fortunate to have obtained a manual called Source Crossing to Ultimate Essence, and saved myself from becoming disabled. Alright, let us talk about you now. Have you encountered any troubles as of recently? Jean Sanchi quickly said the recent events and finally said, Tang Xiu is now occupying that immortal trove. We don't dare to act rashly since we have yet to figure out the force behind him. A cold glint flashed in Daoist Qianquan's eyes. He was pleasantly surprised by the existence of the immortal trove. In fact, escaping from the depths of the abstrusine ground was not entirely for these 2 disciples of his. But if he did not find a way to escape that place, then he would be trapped there eternally and eventually meet his demise thoroughly. Just wait for the news. The matter regarding the immortal trove is a matter of the utmost importance since we ourselves have a predestined affinity with immortality, to begin with. The very reason we absolutely must not miss it. Daoist Qianquan even secretly made up his mind that even if Tang Xiu did have a great force behind him, he still must involve himself and do everything he could even if the probability was minute. Otherwise, with the situation he was currently in, he would only be able to maintain himself for a few years. Adding a few decades more and he would not be able to return to his peak and would certainly die on the cultivation path. Star City. Tang Xiu and Mu Weining stood side by side while watching the faint streetlights outside the window, each with their own ideas in mind. However, since their 4 elders pushed them hard, neither Tang Xiu or Mu Weining could deny them at this time. Else, the final outcome would only make the faces of their parents turn ugly. When will you return to Shanghai? Inwardly, Mu Weining was very excited and happy, though she concealed it very well. She finally broke the long silence with the question. Should be the day after tomorrow. Answered Tang Xiu. Let's go together then. Said Mu Weining softly. I already brought my things over since I originally planned to go to Shanghai from Star City. Okay. No problem, said Tang Xiu with a smile. While looking at Tang Xiu's smiling face, Mu Weining suddenly said, Tang Xiu, it's actually not a problem if you can't accept our relationship. At the worst, we would still be the same like before, a fake couple. Fake couple? Tang Xiu smiled. Regardless of whether it's like that or not, it really doesn't matter as long as both parties don't refuse the idea. Let us just let nature take its course, shall we? We can't say for sure what the future holds. All right. Mu Weining nodded gently. Chapter 672, Serving a Husband. When Tang Xiu and Mu Weining came down from the 2nd floor, a fragrant and delicious meal had been served in the dining room. With Su Lingyun's greeting, the 2 took a seat in the dining table. While looking at the 4 elders happily dining together in a harmonious and happy atmosphere, Mu Weining happily smiled inwardly. As for Tang Xiu, he did not talk much but still maintained an attentive and satisfactory etiquette. After dinner, Tang Xiu originally had the intention to escort the Mu family of 3 to the Long's dining hall. But Tang Yunda and Su Lingyun's great hospitality made the family stay overnight at their home. Despite feeling surprised facing such a situation, Tang Xiu calmly accepted it. Fortunately, Mu Jianhua and Jiang Zhenli only stayed in Star City for 1 day and then left for Beijing on the evening of the next day. Since Tang Xiu had to leave Star City, he went to the magnificent Tang Corporation and explained all the matters to Kang Xia and then transferred a large amount of capital to her account. Following that, he took her to the Research Institute and introduced her to MOE and the other professors and researchers. How about going to my place tonight? It was already 9 in the evening when the 2 left the institute. Kang Xia, who sat on the driver's seat and wore a fur coat, asked with an expectant expression on her face. Tang Xiu originally wanted to refuse, but looking at the expectation on her face and that he also had to leave Star City tomorrow, meaning that they would not see each other for some time, After hesitating for a moment, he finally nodded and said, "All right. Let's go to your place." With a happy expression, Kang Xia accelerated. Her request was not too much. She only hoped that she would be with Tang Xiu, and that already made her fully satisfied and content. She thought that she would have a lot of time with him during winter vacation, and also had a lot of time to see him during this time. Little did she expect that Tang Xiu turned out to be very busy and they could only meet a few times during the winter vacation. Nearly an hour later, the duo arrived at the villa complex where Kang Xia lived. After parking the car in the courtyard, Kang Xia then pulled Tang Xiu into the villa. "Aunt Hong must be resting, no?" Kang Xia stood in the living room and glanced around. Finding that she did not see the figure of the housekeeper anywhere, she immediately spoke in a low voice. Yet, such a situation made her very happy. "Well, you don't seem to like Aunt Hong seeing me," said Tang Xiu with a smile. Kang Xia blushed and said, "How so?" "I'm just afraid that Aunt Hong will disturb us." "That's right. Have you had a supper yet? Do you want me to cook something for you?" A smile outlined on the corner of Tang Xiu's face as he coiled his hands around her body, picked her up and walked toward the stairs. He then smilingly said, "Don't tell me you haven't heard that being with a beauty is better than eating? There's no need for you to cook, I want to eat you." You're gross." The blush on Kang Xia's turned redder as she buried her face on Tang Xiu's neck, feeling incomparably bashful inside. Although the two of them could be considered as husband and wife, they only had sex a few times. She herself hoped for it, and yet felt embarrassed every time. On the corridor of the second floor, Andy was holding a towel and rubbing her wet hair as she came out of the bathroom in pink cartoon pajamas. When she saw Tang Xiu carrying Kang Xia out of the staircase, a disbelieving expression painted her cute, adorable face. The only expression that was inside her big, round eyes. "You guys," Andy gaped and was a bit overwhelmed after she snapped back to her senses. Tang Xiu was left dumbfounded as he held Kang Xia in the corridor. Though he knew that Andy lived in the next-door villa, never did expect that she would be Kang Xia's villa at 10 in the evening. Kang Xia raised her red face from Tang Xiu's neck and, when she saw the stunned Andy, she suddenly remembered that it was herself who asked Andy to come to her place tonight since she wanted to gift her a set of good cosmetics, brought back from abroad by her friend. Immediately, she groaned in depression inwardly and hurriedly got herself down from Tang Xiu's embrace. Why haven't you slept yet, Andy?" Kang Xia looked a bit awkward and a bit helpless as she asked with an embarrassed expression. There was a bit of anger on Andy's small face. She dashed towards Tang Xiu and straightly pulled his arm. "You're really a bad woman, boss. We already promised each other that we'd share everything, joy and misfortune, for better or for worse. But you turned out to be keeping everything for yourself." Kang Xia shook her head, being at a loss whether she had to cry or laugh. Even if they did make a promise to share the blessings and misfortunes together, could this even be said as keeping the food for herself? Surely it doesn't mean that she also wanted to share this kind of joy with one man. Humph. Andy snorted at Kang Xia and then pulled Tang Xiu's arm as she raised her exquisite small face and said, "Boss, you cannot be liberal to one and stingy to other like this. You've seen this lady boss's body, that I know, but you have seen mine too. It is said that Chinese men are good at keeping their responsibility. Shouldn't you be responsible for me too?" An expression of being at a loss whether he had to cry or laugh also covered Tang Xiu's face. Just how an apple can be compared to an orange in this matter. Can a man be held responsible just because he saw a woman's body? I've seen a lot of Japanese sex acrobatic movies. Do I have to be held responsible for seeing those outstanding performers? Tang Xiu did not want to be nagged by this kind of matter too much, so he hurriedly explained, "Andy, you misunderstood us. Kang Xia sprained her foot, so I escorted her from the outside and carried her here. All right, since I've brought her home, then I'll leave her into your care." I should go back now. Did you really get your foot twisted? Andy looked at Kang Xia and changed again to Tang Xiu and immediately asked with a doubtful expression, is that true? Though feeling reluctant, Kang Xia also knew that she would not be able to spend the night with Tang Xiu, so she nodded and said,
Yeah,
it's true. Andy hesitated for a moment and then groaned, I don't care. Boss just hugged you, so it's my turn. Andy, please knock it off, said Tang Xiu hurriedly. I'd also hug you if your foot got twisted one day, okay? All right, take good care of Kang Xia well. I'll go back first. With that said, he immediately turned around and flashed his way out of the villa. After coming out, he suddenly remembered that he took a ride on Kang Xia's car. In order to avoid getting pestered by Andy again, however, he walked straight out of the villa complex and then dialed Moao's cell number. Come and fetch me. Okay. A minute later, the Range Rover car was parked in front of Tang Xiu. After Tang Xiu boarded, he said, go back to Southgate Town. Boss, an unexpected situation just happened. We found some people tracking us, said Moao. Jing who already caught them, and they should be returning soon. Some people tracking me? Tang Xiu slightly furrowed his brows and said, then let us wait here. A few minutes later, a Mercedes-Benz SUV parked next to the Range Rover. As the door was opened, Jing Hu stood in front of the car's window and respectfully said, Boss, we caught the people who were tracking us, a total of 4 men, all of whom have been stunned by us and are now inside the car. Tang Xiu was silent for a moment. Then he took out his mobile phone to call Kang Xia and then said, take them to the villa complex. Since the target they picked to tail is me, I think they are not some good bunch. Interrogate them first, and then we'll see how to deal with them afterward. Inside the villa, Andy followed Kang Xia with a resentful expression. After entering Kang Xia's room, she resentfully groaned, your foot was not twisted at all, right, boss?
Yeah,
said Kang Xia with a forced smile. Andy angrily said, so to say, you really want to keep everything for yourself, yes? Kang Xia threw her bag to the sofa, took a seat and forced a wry smile, you're a big girl already, Andy. Can you just knock it off? Who just made the trouble? You, retorted Andy angrily. You know I like boss very much. Just take a look at the other men outside, each and every one of them is so worthless with their minds are full of filthy thoughts. The only one who can enter my eyes is only our boss. I don't even care if he has a wife. You, Kang Xia opened her mouth, but after looking at Andy's particularly serious expression, she immediately said, Andy, we are indeed good sisters and we do share everything usually. But this man, arg, forget it. I'll tell you the truth now. I do have such a relationship with our boss, but I'm perfectly aware that boss has some sentiments that still hold him down inside. Even if I'm in there, I know very well that it's impossible for him to give his whole heart to me. There's also another thing that I'm very well aware of, that even I myself will not be his legal wife in the future. Andy's eyes blinked. She pointed her finger to Kang Xia all of a sudden and said with amazement, so to say, you're also a homewrecker, a mistress? A mistress? Kang Xia's face looked downcast in an instant, and helplessly replied, can you not use such terms? Else, there's no way we can talk at all. The scowl on Andy's face instantly vanished, replaced by a pleasantly surprised smile. She threw the towel in her hand and then sat next to Kang Xia, reaching out her hand and holding it, and then said with a smile, Boss, I understand now. You really are better than me, a loser. Legal or not legal, I don't give a damn. Boss is so outstanding, for him to have several women is very normal. You also know Lillian, right? She told me a long time ago that she doesn't want to become a legal wife of a man, but she must be that man's mistress. A few days ago, she took some photos and uploaded them on Facebook. You know what? That man is probably that eyeglasses magnate from Hong Kong. She's a vixen whose eyes turn green on the money, replied Kong Xia with a snap. But I think it's fine. What she chases after is money, and yet she also pursues love. Andy shook her head. She said that only a capable man will be able to control her, and yet all capable men will have countless excellent women attracted to them. If you can't monopolize him for yourself, then just sharing him will do. Kong Xia fell silent. She grew up in freedom abroad and naturally understood Andy's way of thinking. Men and women abroad were very open in regards to love, romance, and the relationship between man and woman. They could choose to live together if they wanted to, or get separated when things went south. There were too many capable men abroad who had many women and even capable women who had many men. And that idea also had seriously affected Andy. But then again, why had she not been influenced by those Western ideas? Else how was it possible for her to lose such men despite how outstanding she was? And yet, she must be prepared to share an outstanding man with other women if she wanted to obtain him, even though the taste was so bitter. Arg, forget it. I may not own his love, but I can own his child. Fight, I must try harder, asterisk. Kong Xia clenched her fists, and her expression when she looked out of the window was firm and determined. Chapter 673, Refusing to Give Up the Sinister Scheme. After a while, Kong Xia turned around and looked deeply at Andy, as she raised her hand to pinch her small face and said, "Just do what you want to do. If anything, I'm really vexed and resentful since you made a fuss in the good thing I was about to have tonight. You know what? It was not only my foot got twisted, but also my arms, waist, and neck. So, you're responsible for giving me a massage now." Andy's big eyes lit up with a happy expression. She hurriedly crawled up to the sofa while pinching Kong Xia's shoulders, then she laughed and said, "All right, Chief. Then call boss now. I don't care whatever lies you use, it's fine as long as he gets deceived. Dream on." Kong Xia rolled her eyes at her. Ring ring ring. The mobile phone's ringtone was ringing in the bag and Kong Xia took it. Seeing that it was a call from Tang Xiu, she immediately connected and smilingly said, "Boss, Andy wants you to come back. She's waiting for you and kind of wants to pet you. Cough, cough, knock it off, will you? Just get dressed up, the two of you. I'll be coming to your villa shortly. There's something I need to do." Tang Xiu coughed twice and then said with a serious tone. "What is it?" "It's for interrogating enemies." "All right." A few minutes later, after Kong Xia and Andy had neatly dressed up and come to the first floor living room, they saw that Tang Xiu had come in with Mo and 4 fainted men. "Who are they, boss?" asked Kong Xia with a confused expression. "They were tracking us in secret, discovered them." Wake them up," said Tang Xiu. Mo nodded and walked to the front of the 4 men and used the crudest mean, stepping on their wrists and breaking them. He then went to Tang Xiu's side when they woke up due to the pain. "Who are you?" Though the 4 men's wrists were broken, no scream came out from them, and the asking big man's eyes were even full of killing intent. Ordinary people would have already screamed if their wrists got broken. "Now, tell me. Who are you? Why are you following me?" sneered Tang Xiu. "Humph, we don't know what you're talking about, nor who you are." The big man snorted. "Society runs under the law nowadays, and I demand you to release us. Else you can expect to have a very serious criminal charge on you for kidnapping. Did the people who send you to follow me not tell you who I am?" Tang Xiu jeered. "Do you think stubbornly refusing to talk can help you cope with what you will go through? If you're smart, explain your identity and the purpose why you are following me, perhaps I can spare your life. Else, you can be sure that death won't be your end, for I have too many ways to make you keep your life, longing to be alive and to die and yet unable to ask for both." The big man's pupils contracted and he could not restrain his body from twitching. Suddenly, he pulled out a sharp dagger from his arms and stabbed his comrade's heart. Bam! Moa acted in a flash and kicked the stout man's head, knocking him out directly. He then quickly inspected the man whose heart was stabbed, turned to Tang Xiu and shook his head. He can't be saved. Tang Xiu hummed coldly and shifted his vision toward the other two men who were obviously frightened judging from their pale faces. He then said with indifference, I know why he acted like that and killed your comrade all of a sudden. He's afraid that your comrade will disclose any information. One died and one will follow, adding more 2 or 3 deaths won't be much of difference, no? What about you? Do you still want to conceal it, or will you confess truthfully? I'll speak. The man shot an angry look at the stunned stout man and immediately said, We are from the Strange Doors, intelligence agents of 8 Families Alliance under Strange Doors. We got ordered to investigate your identity and find out the power you belong to. People from Strange Doors? Tang Xiu furrowed his brows and hummed coldly, humph, under whose command? I don't know. The man shook his head. But my leader is the person in charge who's in contact with the people above. However, I know that 6 teams were sent to investigate you, with each consisting of 4 people. We were the first to arrive in Star City, and the other 5 teams should be arriving within 2 days. Tang Xiu then looked at the other man. That man also hurriedly said, That's true. That's all I know about this. Tang Xiu then nodded to Moao, as the latter stepped on the fainted stout man's other wrist to wake him up again. Tell me, which person of the Strange Doors gave you the order to investigate my identity? I know what you have in mind, and why you suddenly killed your comrade. But I can tell you something. Your Strange Doors people are nothing but trash in my eyes. No one in the Strange Doors will go on living if I want to kill you all, said Tang Xiu with a cold expression. The stout man glared angrily at his other 2 comrades and then sneered, Humph, relying on you? Snort, our Strange Doors has a lot of people possessing special abilities. Let alone, forget it. I demand you to release us, else you are dead. You said let alone, is it those 2 cultivators, Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie? Said Tang Xiu indifferently. The stout man's body shook with disbelief in his eyes as he exclaimed out in alarm, How do you know? Seems like it is really them who sent you to investigate me, no? Tang Xiu sneered. Humph, had I known earlier they would not give up their sinister idea, I should have slain them in Kaunas directly, so as not to leave trouble like this. You. The stout man dumbfoundedly looked at Tang Xiu with an increased heartbeat. Though he did not witness what happened in Kaunas himself, he heard a lot of information about it. Never did he expect that this guy would say these words in front of him. Could it be, this guy was the one who not only killed the Serenity Sect's young master, Xian Yugu, and the elegant chess saintess disciple, Wang Hu, but also the one who injured the 2 immortal masters, Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie? You know a lot of things, it seems, eh? Said Tang Xiu indifferently. That's right, I was the one who spared Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijie in Kaunas because I did not want to kill more. However, never did I expect that those 2 could be so wicked and unable to give up their sinister idea to scheme against me. Now, tell me, where are they now? I don't know. Though this big man was filled with fear inside, he still shook his head. Tang Xiu's expression turned cold. He released a strand of qi to the air as it wrapped the stout man's neck, directly pulled him from the floor and hung him in the air. He sneered, I just don't want this to be too troublesome, so I want to know it from your mouth. Else, I can wait for the following investigation team to come here. I'm hella sure some of them will know where Jin Sanqi and Ji Sijia are. Conflicts between cultivators are not something small shrimps like you can involve into. Say no to me and no opportunity will be left for you. I will make you scream and whine for 3 days and nights before I break all of your bones and cut your blood vessels. Only then will I let you swallow your last breath. Bam. The stout man was thrown back to the floor. His face was red as he coughed painfully and yelled with bloodshot eyes, "You wanna know it from my mouth? Dream on. Since it came to this point, then I'll investigate your family," said Tang Shou casually. "I'll torture and kill each and every one of your family members in strange doors. Hopefully, your family only have few children and old people there." "Okay, I'll tell you." The big man shivered and his eyes were full of despair. In his eyes at this moment, Tang Shou was akin to a demon in human skin. He could die, but he knew that all of his family members would be killed if a cultivator made up his mind to retaliate against his family. Even as Tang Shou said, they would be murdered inhumanly. The two immortal masters are in Kana's. Tang Shou nodded in satisfaction. Just as he was about to speak, his expression suddenly changed. He got up and kicked the big man and directly killed the other two men. Following that, he looked at Mo and shouted, "Call the men who are guarding the immortal abode in Longquan Bay. Tell them to withdraw at once and find somewhere to hide." Mo's expression moved and he immediately took out his mobile phone. He let out a helpless expression as he found that he could not contact them after trying for several times. "There should be no signal over there, boss. I can't contact them at all." "Bloody hell." Tang Shou cursed. He quickly fished out his phone and dialed Jia Weili's cell number. "Brother Tang?" Jia Weili's voice was heard on the phone. "Brother Jia, there's something I need your help with," said Tang Shou quickly. "This may be very dangerous and may cost you your life. But you're the only one I know of in Kana's that can help me now." Jia Weili was silent for about half a minute and then asked in a solemn tone, "What is the matter?" "There are 4 of my men standing guard in a certain valley in Longquan Bay. I hope you could rush there to inform them to evacuate immediately before an accident befalls upon them. I'll send you the detailed map later." "Got it." Jia Weili hung up directly after saying that. Tang Shou put away his mobile with a bit apologetic look in his eyes. He knew that he did not have a deep friendship with Jia Weili, and yet, asking his help in this matter was his last resort. In the unlikely event that Jin Sanqi and Jin Sijia were to return to that place, those 4 men of his would probably be victims of their treachery. He too realized something. He would owe Jia Weili a huge favor once the man did what he asked. And this favor would be on him no matter where he went and regardless of him being alive or dead. "Oh, deal with these 4 dead bodies and then wait for me at Star City Airport. I'll go back to Southgate Town first," said Tang Shou after he got up to leave. "I'll go with you, boss," called out Kong Xia hastily. Tang Shou's pace came to a stop as he turned his head and shook his head. "Your cultivation is still too low. Not only will you be unable to help me, but you may also become a burden. Staying here to manage the magnificent Tang Corporation is for the best. Also, everything that happened here tonight must not be disclosed to the outside." "This? I understand. Please be careful." Kong Xia nodded without speaking more. "Don't worry," Tang Shou said. "I will not take risks without full assurance. Besides, you still have the Research Institute to concern about, and I'll leave for Shanghai directly after handling things in Kana's. Just call me directly if something happens on your end." Chapter 674, Encountering Each Other's Adversary. Southgate Town, Kingview Villa. Mu Weining was still up, wearing a coat and standing quietly by the window. Through the slit of the curtain on the window, the dim light made the scenery outside look very clear. She was thinking. She knew that Tang Shou had a lot of things to tend to, though she did not expect that he was really so busy that he had not yet come back so late in the night. Should I call him? The idea crossed her mind many times, and she cast it away every time it appeared. She was afraid that she would disturb Tang Shou in his work and feared that he would be unhappy with her. She became Tang Shou's legal girlfriend, and yet she was anxious for a favor and worried lest she lost him. At this time, she caught sight of the light outside the window. Just a dozen seconds after, she saw a car quickly entering the courtyard, and then Tang Xiu came out of it. As sensitive and keen as she was, however, she was keenly aware that something was not right judging from Tang Xiu's expression. He looked cold and detached, and there was also a trace of anxiousness. Mu Weining hesitated for a moment before she immediately walked out of her room. When she came to the corner of the stairs, she saw Tang Xiu coming up. "Weining, are my parents sleeping?" asked Tang Xiu directly. Mu Weining nodded. "They should be resting already." "You?" Tang Xiu reached out to grab her hand and pulled her into his room. After closing the door from the inside, he said with a serious expression, "There's an emergency, I need to go out of the city, so you can to Shanghai by yourself. Also, my mom wants me to return to Shanghai to attend classes, so we'll have to leave Southgate Town tonight. I'll book a room in the Long's dining hall. You'll be resting there tonight and then immediately go to Shanghai." "What exactly happened? Can I help?" asked Mu Weining with a worried expression. "It's no big deal. I can handle it easily." Tang Xiu shook his head. "However, time is tight, so I need to rush over there right away." "All right. Then I'll change my clothes and do a simple packing before leaving," said Mu Weining hurriedly. "Do you want to inform Uncle and Auntie first?" "No need. They have slept already." Tang Xiu shook his head. "I'll call them and explain it tomorrow." "All right." Mu Weining understood and returned to the room where she was staying. After 5+ minutes of changing clothes and packing up her things, she walked out of the room carrying a suitcase. After Tang Xiu took it over, the duo came to the courtyard as quickly as possible, boarded the car and then left Southgate Town. Tang Xiu then booked a room in the Long's dining hall for Mu Weining. After she properly got settled, Jing who then took him to the airport in a hush. His luck was very good as there was a flight to Blue City just as he arrived, so he boarded the plane and took off without much delay. Kana's Longquan Bay. Amidst the biting cold wind of winter, 2 Wrangler SUVs arrived in a road intersection as Jia Weili, inside one of the SUVs, looked at Gauda map and the position marked by Tang Xiu displayed on his mobile screen with a dignified expression. 1. Turn left and head to the left side of the road. The end of this road is about 5 kilometers ahead, then we'll get off and hurry along the road, ordered Jia Weili. Quickly, 2 SUVs were parked at the end of the dirt road and the front of the mountain range was already faintly seen. After Jia Weili got off the car, and the 4 middle-aged men who came with him observed the surroundings with vigilance. This mountain range was fraught with dangers, as often there were ferocious beasts wandering here, as well as a lot of swamps and areas with miasma. One may meet his demise in this place if they were slightly careless. Xiao Fei, De Fei, you two will drive the car and go to the vicinity of Longquan village to wait for us. Remember, if we haven't yet returned within a week, it means that we already died in the mountains. I'll be relying on you to take care of your big sis-in-law, nephews, and nieces in the future, said Jia Weili with a serious expression. The middle-aged man, whose name was Xiao Fei, had his expression slightly changed and said, "Brother Jia, please let us go with you. We are brothers, if one of us dies we'll die together." "Yes, big brother." De Fei also hurriedly echoed. "You saved our lives back in the past. How can we run away in the face of danger?" Jia Weili let out a smile and patted the 2 men's shoulder. But his face quickly hardened again as he said, "Don't let me deal with things that I need to worry about. I can do things with peace of mind if I know that someone will be there to take care of my family. The 4 of you are my closest brothers. 2 of them were not willing to get married, so they have nothing to concern themselves about, but you both have a family of your own, so I must leave you. Don't argue anymore and don't be stubborn, I've already made up my mind." With that said, Jia Weili quickly took his mobile out, typed a few short messages and sent them out, and then quickly disappeared into the dark night with the other 2 men. "Take care, brother Jia. Take care, big brother," shouted Xiao Fei and Da Fei. Trekking the mountain pathway in the middle of the night was very dangerous for ordinary people. But Jia Weili and his two brothers frequently hiked on mountain pathways and were also very strong, so it did not pose them any problems. This time they came out in a hurry and only brought a few spare clothes and a few compressed biscuits and water, so they did not have a heavy burden on the road. Longquan Swamp. Stars were shining in the vast, boundless sky, with some of them illuminating the place. On the flat ground at the entrance of the mountainside cave, a pile of bonfire burned with meat roasting above. Two experts from the Everlasting Feast Hall were sitting cross-legged before the bonfire and chatting about some issues on their cultivation. On the mountain peak at the opposite side about 2 kilometers away from them, Daoist Qianquan was like a ghost sitting quietly under a big tree, looking toward the bonfire outside the cave while silently observing the two experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall. He could still see everything clearly even at night with his current eyesight. Jin Sijie, whose Sky Piercer halberd was taken by Tang Xiu, ordered the Strange Doors people to help him find a weapon before he left a while ago. It was a very common ordinary spear, but its weight was over 100 pounds. At this moment, he was holding that long spear and standing ramrod like a javelin beside Daoist Qianquan. "Master, why don't we get rid of them earlier? Even if the news of the investigation comes and that Tang Punk does indeed have a huge force behind him, no one will know who did it." Jin Sijie felt a bit vexed and grumpy inside. The last battle here had made him lose face as he ended a complete loser and suffered quite heavy losses, hence he wanted to vent it by killing them. Killing them now is no different than killing them later. Daoist Qianquan shook his head with indifference. "Let's wait a bit. The news will probably come soon." "You just said that killing them now or later is just the same, then why the wait?" said Jin Sijie. "We can go to the Immortal abode and find a way to open the portal to the Immortal Trove if we kill them now. Otherwise, in case that surname Tang notices it and then return with a lot of experts, wouldn't it be the same that we would no longer have the opportunity? Before we get the news, killing these people and going into the cave, in case that Brat Tang was to return here while we were inside and happen to besiege us inside the cave, what should we do then?" commented Daoist Qianquan with a smile. Jin Sijie was at a loss for words. "Hence, there's no need to be impatient and anxious," continued Daoist Qianquan. "Set up a plan and then get into action afterward, only then can you live longer. Had I realized this truth back then, that old blind wouldn't have been able to. Then you wouldn't have been trapped by me, this old blind, for so many years, right?" An old voice drifted into Daoist Qianquan and Jin Sijie's ears along with the cold wind. Daoist Qianquan and Jin Sijie's faces greatly changed, especially the former, who directly floated up into the air. He watched the surroundings with vigilance as his cold and cloudy voice also drifted along with the cold wind. "Why not show up since you are already here, old blind?" In front of the master and disciple duo, a blind old woman with unkempt hair and donning ragged clothes slowly stepped into the air, step by step. And yet, each one of her footsteps created ripples and turbulence in the air. "Qianquan, I never expected that you would actually escape from that abstruse ground alive. Fortunately, this old blind did not go with that little kid, else you would have already created a heartless calamity in this area." Daoist Qianquan's eyes were bloodshot, the chilling killing intent he exuded out creating turbulence in the air around him. Despite having formidable strength, Jin Sijie was still forced out for several meters by this killing intent before he could anchor his footing with a face devoid of color. Daoist Qianquan stared at the blind old woman and said, "You're not dead yet, damned old blind, so how can I possibly die?" Old blind let out an indistinct sigh. After she flew high and stood 10 meters away in front of Daoist Qianquan, she shook her head and said, "It seems that I was too soft-hearted back then. I should have set a fire in that abstruse ground and burned you alive in it. I could have saved. Now I really must come out and waste my strength. Old blind, I killed your family back in the past because your father spoiled my good work." Daoist Qianquan sneered. You trapped me for 60 years, causing my cultivation to drop, and also got my Imperial Dragon chart ruined. Wasn't that enough for our enmity to be written off? I also thought to write it off originally. Old Blind helplessly said. But who could have thought that you don't want to let me spend my remaining years in comfort? Those 4 kids are that little kid's men. They must not die, and neither must that little doll of mine. Hence, I still have to act if you don't give up your sinister ideas. You keep repeating that little doll, kid or whatever, for many times. Exactly who's this little kid? Asked Daoist Qianquan indifferently. Don't ask what you already know. Said Old Blind. Do you still need to play dumb and feign craziness before me? Tang Shou? Said Daoist Qianquan with a frown. If it isn't him, who else could it be? Said Old Blind faintly. That kid promised to secure a place for this Old Blind to enjoy her old age in comfort, and this Old Blind also wants to find the turning point of my own uncanny divination of becoming a god through him. You're planning to scheme him, that's equal to scheme against me. What exactly is the identity of this brat surnamed Tang, and why is he worth to be concerned about by you, old bastard? Asked Daoist Qianquan with gloomy expression across his whole face. I can't see him clearly. I can't understand him thoroughly. Old Blind shook her head. What? Daoist Qianquan's face greatly changed. He was also proficient in divination arts and its calculation, but it was a heavenly secret technique he snatched from Old Blind's father. Only after a long time of persistent meticulous study on it was he finally able to grope about the doorway for a bit. In this regard, he thought that he was much better than this Old Blind. With himself unable to divine that brat surnamed Tang, and she could not calculate it either, then what did this entail? Chapter 675, Fierce and Bitter Combat. Doubtful and anxious were the expressions on Daoist Qianquan's face when he looked at the blind old woman. After a long silence, he suddenly laughed loudly and a burst of momentum erupted from him, as he ridiculed her with a clear voice. I never expected that you would learn to mystify things, Old Blind. Where is the mandate of heaven, fate, or destiny now in this era? I was almost fooled by you. Old Blind shook her head, sighed and looked at Daoist Qianquan with pity in her eyes. She slowly took out a pair of golden gloves underneath her clothes and wore it lightning fast. Daoist Qianquan's face greatly changed, and there was also dread on it. Picking stars catching the moon. It was the strongest card Old Blind had. He was once suppressed by her with this technique and trapped inside the obstrusine ground for so many years that he nearly had his soul vanish. Daoist Qianquan took a deep breath. He grasped the snare drum and said coldly, Old Blind, it seems that you really want to be that brat's lapdog, huh? Gently spreading her hands, Old Blind turned the walking stick in her hand into powder that scattered along with the wind, and then said tranquilly, if he can provide a shelter for this Old Blind to spend her old age, and also gives me an opportunity to have a breakthrough, what's wrong with becoming his lapdog? Hundreds of years passed, what else that can't be seen through and what more can't be passed through? You court death. The snare drum in Daoist Qianquan's hands immediately flew, as the shadow of the drum hovered over his head. As the drum sounded, a tidal-like sound wave surged toward Old Blind. Heavenly secrets. Picking stars catching the moon. Old Blind's disheveled white hair suddenly erected, and dazzling lights suddenly burst out from the golden gloves as she waved her hands. 6 miniature versions of planet images appeared in the sky as if they were summoned. The miniature images of planets then came down with a loud bang. Damn! You've actually succeeded in practicing the 6 starlight array. Daoist Qianquan cursed. His body rose straight from the ground, inciting the layers of shadow drums to collide with the 6 miniature versions of the planet images. At the same time, he pulled out a sharp dagger from his sleeve and pierced his own forehead to force out his blood, and then quickly threw it into the drum shadow. The layered drum shadows suddenly rose in an instant, with a layer of blood light emerging on each of them. The heaven-earth spiritual chi in all directions seemed to be strongly attracted and constantly seeped into the drum's shadows. Explode. With a flushed complexion, Daoist Qianquan maniacally bellowed and brandished the dagger in his hands even more violently. Boom. A deafening sound erupted from the collision of the drum shadow and the planet miniatures, creating tidal-like airwaves sweeping away to all directions. A towering tree that was struck by the airwave behind Daoist Qianquan was uprooted and flew hundreds of meters away. On the opposite mountain peak, the two experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall got up an instant and released their flying swords at once. With grim expressions, they coldly glanced at the direction of the fierce fight between Daoist Qianquan and Old Blind, since they felt that the violent airwave coming at them was from that direction. The two exchanged looks and could see horror and dread in the other's eyes. They may have broken through to the Foundation establishment stage at present, but the impact created by the intense combat between such powerhouses still made them palpitate. They had gone through dangers and risked their lives for innumerable times, and therefore were very sensitive to the absolute gap between their strengths with those powerhouses who were now in intense combat. I don't know them. One of the Everlasting Feast Hall's experts took the binoculars and observed the appearance of those two people and shook his head. Whoosh. Whoosh. Two figures rushed out of the cave lightning fast. When they learned of what happened, one of them immediately said, "Let us hide first no matter who they are. We won't be able to survive if they want to deal with us given their strength. Also, we must find a way to call boss right away and tell him what's happening here." Got it. The other three nodded. They did receive an order to guard the cave and protect the immortal trove, but it was unlikely they would sacrifice themselves for nothing since they fully aware that this was a circumstance where they were not a match for the enemy at all. Now that I have found you all, don't even think about leaving. Grasping a long spear in his hand, Jin Sijia appeared in front of the quartet like a ghost. His cultivation had reached the peak Foundation establishment stage and was half a step away from breaking through to the Golden Core stage. He could confront these four from the Everlasting Feast Hall easily and thus look down on them. It's you, Jin Sijia. Jin Shi, the name of an expert of the Everlasting Feast Hall. His eyes were staring intently at Jin Sijia as he shouted in a deep voice, "Our boss spared your life before. I never expected that you would still dare to have eyes on the immortal trove. Are you not afraid that our boss will come back with a huge force and completely destroy you? I might have to worry about that had it been a couple days ago. But now, your death is imminent, and I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Go turn into stupid ghosts in hell." The long spear in his hand was shot out in an instant to impale Jin Shi's head. He did not use all his strength, and even used less than 80% of it, yet he was confident in his judgment that these four men could not avoid it. Formation. Just as Jin Shi was braving such a dangerous situation, the other three had already moved and the four phenomena formation was formed in an instant. Four flying swords flew up in a circle and smashed the ordinary long spear. In a rapid turn under the control of Jin Shi's group of four, it had Jin Sijia surrounded in the middle. What? Impossible. With a drastic change in expression, disbelief flashed from Jin Sijia's eyes. He was an expert at the peak Foundation establishment stage. Even though the weapon he used was not a magic treasure, it was highly unlikely for it to be smashed in an instant like that. This sword formation. Bloody hell, these four fellows unexpectedly have broken through the Foundation establishment stage as well. Jin Sijia cursed. As formidable as his body may be, he would only be at disadvantage without a formidable weapon. He could only explode out his true essence to form an explosive punching light to smash the sword's shadow, that plunged toward him in rapid twisting moves. Boom. The sword formation was broken as Jin Sijia and the quartet flew backward and spurted out blood at the same time. Despite the sword formation they arranged and its might that was equal to the four men's power added together, it still could not withstand the eruption of Jin Sijia's power. However, the one that ended up the most miserable was not them, but Jin Sijia. At the moment, his fist was smashed by the sword formation and it also had shattered his hand, leaving only half of his entire right arm. The sword images also left tattered wounds on Jin Sijia's body and instantly turned him into a blood-painted man. Impossible. A grieving and heartbreaking scream came out of Jin Sijia's mouth. His body suddenly plunged back for hundreds of meters as he flew in the air and looked in disbelief at his own broken arm. He could not figure out why the sword formation could break his defense and even inflicted such a heavy blow on him. Even if those four longswords were all magic weapons, it would not be able to do so, right? Jin Shi's group of 4 gathered again in an instant. Their faces looked pale and had their blood stirred up inside. And yet, they stared coldly at Jin Sijia along with intense killing intent. Far away in the distance, Daoist Qianquan, who had been fighting with Old Blind, did not pay attention at all to the fight between Jin Sijia and Jin Shi's group of 4, since those 4 were nothing but kids who were only guarding the place without many abilities, so it would be very simple and easy for Jin Sijia to kill them. However, when he heard the miserable scream from Jin Sijia and looked in their direction for a moment, his complexion changed greatly along with disbelief in his eyes. He knew perfectly well the state of cultivation of his disciple at present, and yet, never did he ever dream that his disciple, with a peak foundation establishment stage cultivation, would be so severely injured by 4 ant-like existences. It was a tragedy. Boom. When Daoist Qianquan was distracted, Old Blind released a silk golden thread instantly and nearly bounded him. Damn wretch. Since you old bastard is looking for death, then I'll fulfill your wish. The most ferocious side of Daoist Qianquan was stimulated. He was already at disadvantage using the technique to fight against Old Blind's picking stars catching the moon technique, and couldn't care less about it anymore. He released the golden core inside his body as 3 savage-looking shadows were instantly separated from him. The last time he got trapped by Old Blind was because he was negligent and was too late to release his ultimate trump card, resulting in him getting suppressed. But this time, he would never give her another chance. Since she seemed to be trying to pester him, then he might as well blast everything he had and go for the kill. 3 shadows flew in 3 directions and instantly flashed to the front of Old Blind. As the silk golden thread was cut by the dagger floating around him, his ping-pong-sized golden core erupted a bright light and bombarded Old Blind's chest. Following that, the 3 shadows also sent out barrages punches to bombard her. Heavenly secrets, ever-changing Big Dipper stars. Old Blind opened her 10 fingers and released splashing golden fingers as they instantly pierced the 3 shadows sent out by Daoist Qianquan. Half a second after, she disappeared in an instant and appeared hundreds of meters away. Old Blind. I'll make you taste the killing move I've been learning for decades. That was exactly a killing move that I've comprehended. Daoist Qianquan himself was pierced through by the golden fingers, but the injuries were not serious, and instead, he maniacally laughed and plunged towards Old Blind with a distorted face. Old Blind furrowed her brows and released the ever-changing Big Dipper stars technique yet again. She immediately flew towards the opposite mountain peak and took only a few seconds to appear behind Jin Sijia. She flicked a Buddhist bead and it instantly shot towards Jin Sijia's back. 1 strike. And yet it made Jin Sijia's injury even worse, misfortunes that piled up on one another. However, Old Blind did not continue attacking him again but instantly appeared in front of Jin Shi's group of 4. She waved her hands like a stream of qi that instantly wrapped their bodies and shouted, "Don't struggle if you don't want to die. This Old Blind has a relationship with Tang Xiu, so I can't let you die in this place." Jin Shi's group of 4 had their complexions changed. They just released their flying swords a moment ago, but after hearing Old Blind's revelation, they immediately determined that she was a friend and not an enemy. As the flying swords returned back to their hands, they also retracted back their surging true essence. Let's go. Old Bind stepped into the air and brought Jean Sher's group of 4 flying for a kilometer before she spurted out blood. Despite her extremely fast speed, releasing the ever-changing Big Dipper stars continuously made her injuries worsen.